Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Sean. Welcome to 마이1시간. This video contains interviews with three friends of mine, Chad, Leigh, and Paul, who are all native English speakers. This video is broken up into 6 different conversations with them. And this is the first time I'm releasing these interviews. This video is not a compilation of other videos. This is all new content. Try watching it with or without subtitles. Just click the CC button on YouTube. Also, if you're currently studying English, I highly recommend you check out my website. There, with only one purchase, you can access 4 different series. I have a series all about travel and using English abroad. That means going through immigration, asking for directions, ordering in cafes and restaurants, stuff like that. That series is called 미국인 전의 여행 마스터. I have a series all about small talk, making friends with people, and starting conversations. This series is called 미국인 전의 살아있는 영어. There are other series on the website too that you can once again access with one purchase. Click the link down below to watch a free sample. Without further ado, let's begin the video.
Hey, how's it going? What's your name? Where are you from?
All right, my name is Leigh Holland. I'm doing great today, and I'm from Alabama in the United States.
What originally brought you to Korea?
Well, I originally came as a middle school teacher, but I am a Christian, and I felt like God wanted me to be here. It's a strange thing.
Yeah.
When I say that, people say, "Oh, did you want to come as a missionary?" I was like, "No, it's not that." Before I came to Korea 12 years ago, I saw a random YouTube video about Korea, and I thought about the country every single day for 3 months. And I was like, why am I thinking about this country all the time? I had no Korean friends, like nothing.
Ooh,
and
interesting.
my father suggested to me, maybe God's trying to tell you something. So I prayed about it a lot, and I prepared, and I applied to be a teacher here, and I just felt like I was supposed to be in this country. That's a very complicated way of saying I think I was meant to come. Yeah.
Some kind of destiny.
Yeah. And I did meet my husband here, so who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe I had to be here to meet him. But I knew from reading blogs and things that one of the most stable ways to be in Korea was to be a teacher. And I was already a teacher in America. I love teaching, so I thought, okay, that's simple. So process, you have to apply, and it was a long application process. They're very thorough, they're very careful with who they take and make sure you're an okay person. And I thought, okay, now I'm going to go teach in Sejong. And the great thing about Sejong at that time was if you Googled it, there were no pictures of the city. There were architectural plans for the city they wanted to build. So that was kind of terrifying. It's like, okay, I'm going to go to Korea, to this city that is just drawings that hasn't been built. But it turned out great. It was lovely to be part of the history of that city becoming a place.
Yeah, the city's not very old.
No, I think 2011 or 2012 was when it started. And how often you get to be in a place that is like a year ago this didn't exist and now it's here. I loved it. You know, if I could choose again, I think I would have chosen that because it was so unique.
How was that like first coming to Korea?
Well, it was wonderful because I wanted it so much, and I already loved Korea. I had researched it, and I had a willing heart. Like I was ready to do my best and to love it. But I had never been to another country before, not even on vacation.
Never left America?
I had never left America.
Wow.
No, I was a good small town girl, and I had never left.
I think that's actually interesting. Like, I think a lot of Americans actually don't travel that much.
Yes.
Like, you look at Europeans, you look at Koreans, you look at other people from other Asian countries. A lot of Americans, I even heard, don't even have a passport.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that's super common. So in Europe, all the other European countries are so close. In Korea also, it's easy to go to Japan or the Philippines. But in America, everything is far, unless you happen to live close to Canada or Mexico. So I would say that the majority of people I grew up with in the South in America did not have a passport, did not even think about traveling.
So you got to Sejong, and how was that first year of teaching?
I was at an all-boys middle school. So that's 800 teenage boys. And at the time, most of them were not very interested in English. So I loved them, and they were just so warm-hearted. But it was a challenge because I had read online about in Korea, they love education. The parents are into it. The kids are just go-getters. And that might be true for Seoul, but it's not always true for the provinces.
Yeah, it's a stereotype for sure.
It is. And
Kids are kids. People are people.
And they want to be playing games. They want to be doing other things. So I had a lot of work cut out for me. It was emotionally very hard because I was a teacher in America and I was loved. I was coming off this high of, oh, my American students think I'm great and I'm such a good teacher. And then I come over here and there's a lot less interest in my lessons. I was like, I'm not a good teacher. Yeah. So it was hitting me in my identity, Sean. Yeah. My identity was threatened. So I think the first year was hard, less because of cultural differences, though there were, but more because this thing that I was so good at, I felt like I wasn't good at anymore.
Sure.
But it was really just time figuring out what do the kids actually need, what do they actually connect with, and that was trial and error in time.
Good for you.
Thank you.
You said you've been here for 11 years?
11 years in Korea, yes.
Yeah. What do you like so much about Korea that you've continued to stay here?
The people are lovely. There are cultural elements. I mean, I do love the food, and I have a lot of hanbok that I wear. So I like all the cultural things, but it's really the people. I find them so warm-hearted. There are exceptions anywhere you go, but the overall willingness of people here to accept me or to try to get to know me, even if they don't speak English, the kindness I run into everywhere is pretty great. Yeah. So I think it's the people that kept me here this long.
Do you have any examples of this kindness?
This kindness, okay. Yeah. Let me see. So in my first school, which was so difficult because it was before I could speak Korean, and it's when I was struggling as a teacher, we had to wear indoor shoes. That's a culture change. But in the school, we had guest shoes, and I didn't know that I needed to buy indoor shoes. And another teacher, she bought indoor shoes for me.
Wow.
And just regularly, things like that. My co-teachers would buy me snacks, or they would invite me over for a meal or something. I just saw it so consistently. But I think the shoes in my first week, that was the first thing. Someone bought shoes for me.
Yeah.
That was big.
Wow, even like a small thing like that can just be very touching, you know?
You know, there's so many visitors to Korea. We have international students, we have people coming in to work, and even a small gesture like that, it can change someone's entire heart toward the country and be like, oh, I could stay here, I could do this. So a small gesture has so much impact. So I'm so thankful to her for that.
Yeah, I have a story too about like a very touching experience. Like, I'm very tall, as you know. I'm very tall and skinny guy.
Really?
Really. So when I practice jujitsu, there's many types of body types. You could be short and more stocky, maybe just tall and just like giant, you know. But there's this one older Korean guy in my gym, and he's like, hey, we have similar body type, and he's just like really advanced. And he's like, I'm gonna take care of you. I'm gonna teach you. I'm gonna take you under my wing. Yeah, and
I love it.
Every time I go there, it's like, Sean, be my partner. I'm gonna teach you. Like, he doesn't have to do that.
Right.
And he's just so kind, and it's just like, it melts my heart a little bit, you know?
I think also when you come to a new country and there's the cultural difference and the language difference, you become a child again. So you really, and that is such a humbling thing. You come over as a 21-year-old or a 31-year-old, and it doesn't matter how old you are, there are things you can't do for yourself. And to have somebody show up and do that for you, I think we remember these things because it's as meaningful as when we were a tiny little kid and someone helped us in our home country.
That's a great point.
You become that child again. You need someone to supply that.
So, Leigh, was there anything that like helped you to assimilate into the community, to like really meet people, to make good friends? Because I feel like, and I've talked with a lot of foreigners, is like a common theme is, I'm lonely. I can't meet people. Everybody just wants to practice English with me. My coworkers, they're really nice to me, but then like they just go home and have their own life.
Right.
Like, how did you kind of satisfy that need for community?
Right. Okay, that's a good one. So two things for me. I'm a fitness person and I'm a Christian. So it was church and gym. And I think the thing you mentioned is often as foreigners you can feel that the people who approach you or who want to be friends, it is for English. And that's sad because it's not intended that way, but it can make you feel used.
Yeah.
And that's not a good basis for friendship.
Sure.
So I had to decide to be uncomfortable myself. So I had to put myself in language discomfort and go to a Korean church and a Korean gym. So I know all the muscle names in Korean because
Let's go.
like my PT teachers, my personal trainers were all Korean only Koreans. And so now I know like Gwanbaegun and different words for the muscles.
Yeah.
But I think my connection to people was church and gym. The way I maximized that was by going to places where they only spoke Korean. So if anyone wanted to be friends with me, it was because they wanted to contact with me. They couldn't get a lot of English if in an all Korean environment. So I made sure, and the thing about church and gym is like it's habitual. It's gym almost every day.
True.
It's church every week. So you're seeing the same people. They know you. They're comfortable with you.
That's amazing.
And I think that's what you really need to have. You need to have those patterns where here, away from your family, away from your friends, where you've got this touchstone. It's like, okay, today is a rough day, but tomorrow I'm going to see people I know, and they're going to ask how I am. That's big, the pattern, I think.
You're happy with your time in Korea?
Yeah, no, I love Korea. I've been so happy and so blessed here, and I still am. No, it's 11 years of good. Even when it's been hard, it's been good. I'm grateful. I like it here.
Amazing. All right, well, I think that's a good place to wrap this topic up. Thank you so much for talking with me, Leigh.
Thank you, Sean. I've been so delighted to talk with you.
Right on. Cool. See ya. Hey, how's it going? What's your name? Where are you from?
Hi everyone, my name's Paul. I'm from Canada, Ottawa specifically.
So what originally brought you to Korea?
It was my cousin's recommendation. So she was teaching in Korea and she taught here for about a year and she met her fiance and then husband. Then another friend was also teaching here in Pohang. So I thought, this sounds like a nice place. They kept saying it's comfortable, you'll enjoy your time here. And I came and I explored and I decided it's pretty fun. So I've stayed for a while.
Okay, so you originally came to explore the country and see if, you liked it. How long ago was that?
I first came in August 2011. Well, almost 14 years.
Yeah.
14 years in August, right?
That's a long time. So you
Yeah.
came in 2011 because you're a friend and your cousin, they had good experiences. Is your cousin is she still living in Korea?
No, she did 1 year and then came home, but she also gave it a glowing recommendation. She said, you'll never get lost here. You'll never feel in danger here. So I came here and it was all true. I really felt safe. Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable in this country.
Did you say that she got married to a Korean person?
No, I think she met another teacher at her school.
Ah,
And then they went home and eventually got married later, but yeah,
and he was Canadian.
I'm gonna say yes.
You're not sure.
Please, if you're watching, Lauren, I'm sorry, I don't remember.
All right. She'll forgive you. Cool. So you then came 2011. You're like, oh wait, okay, this place is pretty cool. It's safe. It's fun. I feel comfortable here. How did you start living and working here?
I started working right away.
Oh.
So I came and I got a job working at a hagwon.
Yeah.
I had only been teaching English for 1 year in Canada. I was volunteering at a community center. So then actually teaching in a real classroom, I felt kind of uncomfortable, especially because my school didn't train me.
Sure.
They just kind of threw me to the wolves and said, hey, let's see what you can do. I think I adapted pretty well. I think I've got a very good rapport with kids. I know how to understand them and feel very sympathetic for them. It wasn't always easy, right? Right at the beginning, I definitely made mistakes where I was like too lenient, too harsh. It took me a while to find like a nice middle road where I was strict but fair.
So you can't be too nice and kind of a pushover, but you can't be too strict and kind of a dictator.
If you're a tyrant,
Yeah, tyrant.
the kids will just hate you.
They'll
And
hate you.
they'll hate the whole experience.
Yeah.
And I want them to go away kind of enjoying it. I feel like having a playful attitude when you're learning really helps you learn almost any subject.
Sure.
If it's just like pain and struggle the whole time, you're probably going to resent the whole subject. Probably not learn much either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2011, you come, you immediately you explore the country, you get a job, and you start teaching. You had 1 year experience teaching in Canada. And you're now teaching English here in Korea. So have you just been living now in Korea since 2011?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow, that's a long time.
I know. I started at my first school. I stayed there for about 5 years. I went to another school in Ulsan, was there for a year, and then I came back to Seoul because Seoul is just a lot more interesting than a lot of the other cities.
Yeah. What does Seoul have that the other cities don't have?
I guess a really big community of foreigners.
Sure.
There were foreigners in Ulsan, but it was just hard to find a niche group that I thought I could really jive with. Now I'm back in Seoul and I've got some healthy hobbies. I'm doing jiu-jitsu nearly every day and I really like it here. Yeah, it's comfortable.
Great. So when you're moving abroad to another country, like how important is it to find a good community to connect with? That's pretty important in my opinion.
Oh yeah, it's so important. That's the reason I left Ulsan after 1 year because
You were lonely?
I was incredibly lonely.
Yeah.
It might have been my own fault because maybe I was too shy to go out and approach people and say, hey, you and me have a conversation. Let's figure out if we can be friends. But I'm too shy for that.
Are you shy?
I think I am, yeah. If I'm in a one-on-one scenario, I can talk freely. But if I go to a bar and I'm surrounded by a bunch of noise and people I don't know, I become a shy person.
Yeah. So you like smaller groups?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I can just focus on one person and try to understand them. But if I'm in a scenario like a bar where people are all talking loudly, I don't know, maybe it just overwhelms my brain.
Sure. So what do you like so much about Korea that you've continued to live here?
It's gonna sound a little strange, but the mountains are one of the reasons that I'm still here. I think just having the accessibility to go to a mountain every single day, if you really wanted to, is kind of amazing. In Canada, if you wanted to go to a mountain, you would have to wake up in the morning at 3 a.m., drive for an hour, get to the mountain, hike, and then by the time you're done all that, 6 a.m. you go to work. Like, that's not fun at all.
Yeah.
But my first year in Korea, I think I visited Namsan more than 20 times. I would start work at 1 o'clock. Every morning I had 3 hours of time where I was just sitting around thinking, what should I do? Oh, there's a tower off in the distance. I'm gonna walk towards it. And I just climbed mountains every weekend.
Yeah.
Got on a subway and visited a new neighborhood every weekend. It was freeing, right?
Sounds like an explorer's paradise.
Yeah, I could see something new every weekend with very little effort. It wasn't like I had to carefully plan, oh, I have to catch this bus at this time. No, just get on a subway, get off anywhere, and then follow the hikers to the mountain. I don't even need to know the name of the mountain. I can just go anywhere and be like, hey, there's an old lady with a hiker's hat on. I'll follow her.
Sure. Maybe that's one of the biggest charms of Seoul is that everything is so compact and close together. You know, you don't have to travel that far to go somewhere new, to go hiking, to go to a new neighborhood. I agree. Probably more than Ottawa, right? Ottawa is maybe more spaced out.
It's incredibly spaced out.
Yeah.
You're right. If you don't have a car in Ottawa, you're going to struggle because the subway, well, there's one subway, but it doesn't really work. There's a bus system, but waiting outside in minus 30-degree weather for 30 minutes for a bus that maybe won't come, that's not fun at all. You need a car to survive in Ottawa, and everything's very spread out.
Do you see yourself living in Korea for a while longer? you see yourself maybe settling down here? Do you want to get married? Is this something that is on like your list of kind of goals?
Oh yeah, I'd love to get married.
Sure.
Yeah. First, find the right woman.
Sure. That's stage one.
Yeah.
and I guess if she's Korean, do you see yourself living a nice life here for the foreseeable future?
I think that's a discussion I would have with my partner.
Sure.
Because I kind of want to be flexible enough that if my partner was here and she said, hey, I want to be in Korea, my family's in Korea, I'm really attached to it, I would say, yeah, I'm totally down with that. But on the other hand, if she was like, I've got a job in Canada and I'd really like to live in Canada, or I want to pursue this opportunity in Canada, I would live there too. Yeah.
So you're very flexible. All right, cool. But you'd be happy either way.
Yeah, I think so. But I think if I did have kids here, I would try to take them out before high school and move to Canada, because high school in Korea seems a little too intense.
Sure.
At least all the high school students, my former students that I taught in middle school and elementary school who went on to high school here, they seem kind of sad. And I really feel sorry for them. And I really want to just cheer them up every time I see them. So yeah, maybe high school, not so much, but this is a very safe place. So I'd be very happy walking around with the little babies here. Right?
Sure.
And all the people seem so nice. Like every time they see a baby, they just want to like poke their cheeks and say hello. Lift them up, be like, oh, look how strong you are, little baby.
Yeah, I bet your baby would do jujitsu.
Oh yeah,
from age
for
one.
sure.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to end it for this topic. Thank you so much for talking with me, Paul.
Thank you, Sean.
Cool. See you later. Hey, how's it going? What's your name? Where are you from?
Hi, my name is Chad and I'm from the United States.
So Chad, what originally brought you to Korea?
So when I first came to Korea, I was actually in the United States Army. I came here as part of a rotational unit that spends usually about 9 months in Korea. And so I wasn't in Seoul, I was a little bit north, I was closer to the border. But I spent about 2 months here out of a 9-month rotation and then went back to the US. But yeah, that time was it had a big impact on me and actually caused me to come back to Korea after I got out of the military.
Why did you end up coming to Korea? Was it just random?
With the military, right?
Yeah.
So it was not up to me. As with many things in the military, it's dictated to you. In fact, I did not want to come to Korea because it was over the holidays. And so I wasn't able to spend Christmas or the New Year with my family. And so I was really salty about that. And during my time in Korea, I was a little bit, not miserable, but I was a little bit unhappy that I was here versus being in the US. I'm ultimately happy that decision was made because it's led to me being here now for many years.
Sounds like destiny.
I say that about my military experience in general, but also more specifically about them bringing me to Korea, is that there's no way I would be here if not for that decision to bring me over to Korea for these final 2 months of the rotation.
So you came to Korea, you were here for only 2 months, then back to the US, yeah? Now what's going on in your head? Like, I gotta get back to Korea or what?
So yeah, I decided to live here for 1 year teaching English. It was sort of just a transition from me getting out of the military and ultimately me going to graduate school. And so I decided just for 1 year I would teach English, really get that confirmation of if I actually liked living in Korea or if I just, thought I had a good time and really didn't. And so I spent 1 year teaching English here in Seoul at an academy, which was great. I had a pretty good time, all things considered. It was much better, in my opinion, than my time in the Army. So I had a great time, and that sort of confirmed to me that Korea really was a good place for me to live and sort of explore further.
What do you like so much about Korea that you've chosen to continue to live here?
So it's sort of changed over the years. There's sort of the things that are very novel at the beginning that sort of keep you here in the short term, and then there are sort of things that you realize slowly over time are really good about Korea and sort of keep you here longer term. And so at the beginning, it's very, surface level things like the food, and people are nice generally. They think you're a foreigner, so they want to, show you the good aspects of Korea, right? And so delicious food, good people, and lots to see. It's very just a novel place, very different from the US, right? These are the things that sort of kept me here at the beginning. You know, maybe
Everything's new and exciting in the
Exactly.
beginning.
Yeah. Everything's new and exciting at the beginning, and so it sort of keeps you here in the short term, keeps your attention. But over time, things sort of change where you start thinking longer term about your life and stability and what you want to do, you know, with your adult life. And so suddenly things like health insurance being very cheap and, you know, work opportunities maybe being a little bit better in Korea relative to the US for maybe a particular sector that you're working in. These sorts of things are what sort of keep me here long term. The opportunities that I have for work, the type of work that I can do here and make a decent living versus in the US, would I be able to do the same thing? You know, maybe not. Like I mentioned before, like healthcare, much cheaper here than it is in the US. And so that's, you know, sort of a very administrative plus that I think about. Education is also much more emphasized here, probably a higher tier than in the US. And so these are things that sort of keep me here in the longer term, sort of the social programs and the way things are set up here for people to live sort of keep me here longer term.
You're also involved in a lot of communities here as well, right?
Yeah. Yes, so that's one thing that I think when I started teaching English here, you know, as I got that confirmation that I really liked Korea, I started to sort of integrate into society a little bit more, not be so separated. Because during my time in the army, I was completely separated. You know, I would live on the military installation, which is basically just the United States. So there's no big difference.
Right.
Yeah, so there's no big
All
difference.
English speaking, yeah.
All English. Like there's some Korean soldiers there as well, of course, and you know, you can tell that it's Korea, but all the rules are it's the US, right? But when I came back and started teaching English, it was more of all right, now I'm in like real Korea. Let's explore real Korea. And so I started to integrate by learning the language, and eventually I got into running. So I'm a big runner. I run, you know, marathons, long distances. And so I started to find groups to do that.
Yeah.
And so those sorts of groups have also been very helpful in sort of adapting to living in Korea, making new friends, you know, navigating some of the, you know, more difficult things that come with living in Korea. But yeah, those social circles, and, you know, running is just one of many, but those social circles are another thing that really keep you here long term, because if you don't have those things, it would be hard to stay here if you don't have those things that sort of keep you tied, keep you, you know, engaged with living here.
Yeah, I've known quite a few people who, you know, have lived here happily. They're like, oh, it's safe, the food's good, the people are nice,
Right.
but they couldn't find a community to connect with and to really just ground them, you know, because humans need community, right?
Right.
And so they ended up leaving, or they ended up going to like another city or bouncing around Korea, or like leaving for another country in Asia or something.
Right.
But you found communities and people that you like and that you feel comfortable with, including I would say myself too. Like, you're part of my community.
Sure. Yeah.
And we see each other quite a bit. That's really important, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It's everything.
It really is almost everything. I mean, I'll admit that nowadays, much of the time, I don't bother to make friends with other foreigners living in Korea, because so many people are not like me and you. They decide to come to Korea for maybe 1 or 2 years and teach English and then go back to their home country, and you never see them again. Maybe you'll get a message or two from them, you know, once a year, once every 2 years, but you know, they sort of disappear. And so these days, most of the time, I just make friends with Koreans who I know aren't really going anywhere. They're gonna stay in Korea because that's where they live. It's sort of become this thing where it's not that I ignore other foreigners, but I don't take like extra steps to like reach out and find foreign friends. I just don't feel the need to, especially with my Korean language ability now. It's like I don't need that sort of crutch, if you want to call it a crutch, of like, oh, I need an English language circle to hang out with. It's like, no, I have these other circles, and like you mentioned before, we're in some of the same circles as well. You know, we see each other quite a bit, and so if I have like a sort of foreigner circle, it's you. You know, you know the things that we do together. You know, whether it's you know, talking like this or meeting other people. You know, you and me, we are the sort of foreigner circle, but most of my other circles are all almost completely Koreans. And so I think that's, you know, very important and very different than how some other foreigners end up living in Korea.
Do you see yourself living here long term?
I see myself living here definitely in like short to medium term, absolutely. Whether it'll be a forever living situation, I can't really say. There are so many things.
Say.
Yeah, it's hard to say. You know, there are so many things that could happen in the U.S. that would cause me to go back, such as, you know, a parent's deteriorating health, or, you know, something like this could maybe prompt me to go back, even if it's short term. It could prompt me to go back and sort of handle things there and then maybe come back. But it's hard to say. Right now, there are no plans to go back, though. Like, not even a long-term plan to return to the U.S.
If you hadn't come to Korea, what do you think you'd be doing?
Ooh, that's really hard to say, because the last time I had like a real job in the U.S., I was in the military, and so
Maybe you'd still be in the military.
that's possible, but I don't think that would have been right for me. My military experience was great, and you know, I don't regret doing it, but I knew pretty early on that it was not the life for me. Whether I would be here in Korea or I would be in the US, I don't think the military is something that I would have continued doing. But as for what I would be doing, I did my master's degree, and so I probably would have tried to like lean on what I did for my master's.
Which is what?
So I did international affairs, and so very political focused, lots of, you know, NGO work or just political circles, Washington, D.C. So I probably would have pursued something in that direction a little bit harder, leaned on that a little bit.
But you're here now.
I'm here now, and
Yeah.
no plans to leave.
Cool, man. Well, really nice to hear about your experience in Korea. I think it's a good place to end the interview, so thank you. And let's call it here.
All right.
All right, see you later.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going? What's your name? Where are you from?
I am Leigh Holland. I'm from Alabama in the United States, and I'm having a great time today.
How long have you been in Korea?
I have been in Korea for 11 years.
Holy moly. In what ways, in your perspective and your experience, has Korea changed over these 11 years?
Okay. One thing I immediately think of is products that are available in stores. When I first came to Korea, I heard from everybody online, okay, if you're gonna live in Korea, if there's like a toothpaste or a shampoo you really love, you have to bring it. You will never find it in Korea. If there's a brand of chocolate that's your favorite, you have to bring it. And so when I came, other people I know and myself were packing these massive suitcases full of stuff, all of which can now be bought in Korean stores.
Yeah.
So I think the imports have changed drastically. The products available, foreign products that you can find easily now, totally different than 11 years ago.
Great point. Like, when I got here, people were always talking about G Market and
Yes.
iHerb.
Yes.
And like, it's like, oh, if it's not on G Market or iHerb, you're out of luck. Like, even stuff like coconut oil was really hard to find, like apple cider vinegar,
Yep.
which I, use and consume a lot. But nowadays, Coupang has everything. Or you just go to like, even Honey Jumps have a lot.
Yes.
It's really, really nice. It's really nice.
And I remember, little things like I would bring Reese's peanut butter cups from America because at the time my friends and my students, everyone loved it. And I could not find them anywhere in Korea. They were not sold. And now I think that's readily available. So that's a change.
That's a great example.
And so definitely products and food. There's a lot more imported things that are available. I'm going to say pet culture.
Okay.
When I first came to Korea, I knew or saw very few people walking dogs or people who I knew had a pet. And now, even photography studios, half the pictures are people who came in to take a photo of their dog. Or if you're walking in the park and you see someone with a stroller, it's 50-50 whether it's a human child or a dog in that stroller. So I think there's a lot more pet culture lately. People love their animals. It was absolutely not a thing when I first came.
Oh, interesting.
If the few people I knew who had dogs, they were treated kind of like as social outcasts. It's like, why are you walking around with that dangerous thing?
Sure.
Even if they had a reasonably small dog, people reacted with dislike and even fear of, oh, it's a dog. And I've just seen that change so dramatically. So pet culture really on the rise, I think.
Do you have any pets?
I do not. I'd love to, but I have a baby, and that's plenty. That takes the time.
Sure. Yeah, my friend, I think many years ago, moved here with two of his dogs and had a really hard time finding like a place to live. that would accept the
Like,
animals.
There's rules on the apartments, like where you can have them, where you can't.
Yeah, but even now, these days, like even in the place where I'm living, we have a dog next door. We have a dog on the first floor. We have a dog in the next building. They're everywhere. Yeah, I think it's a great point that they're much more accepted and common in society.
Something you mentioned that I think more foreigners are better at Korean now compared to when we first came. There were like, you would have very few foreign friends who were really, really fluent in Korean.
They were like magicians.
Yes. And you just watch them, oh, look how you ordered for us. And it was amazing. And now I have so many friends that are a level 5 or 6 TOEIC that, could work a job full time in Korean. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
It makes me less special, but
Yep.
I do love that because the more Koreans who see foreigners just learning Korean, it draws people together. It makes you more united, more accepted. It's not like, oh my gosh, you speak Korean. It's like, well, of course you do. You worked hard, you studied, and I love that more foreigners are speaking Korean well than when I first came.
I agree. I would rather live in a world where people assume you speak Korean rather than people assume you don't speak Korean. Or at least ask, do you speak Korean?
I do think we've got a lot more like public trash cans. When I first came, I was warned, if you are out in the world and you produce trash, you carry that trash with you in your bag until you get home. And I think it creates a problem because if there aren't legal, easy access places to throw away your garbage, people are going to throw it away illegally anyway.
Yeah.
So you just... at random trash mounds, I think there's less of it. So as public garbage cans increased, because there were just none when I first came here. Like
Right.
I would carry like an empty soda can in my purse for hours until I got home because you just couldn't throw it away anywhere. And in terms of attitudes, one thing I noticed, and it may be because I lived kind of in the countryside when I first came,
Sure.
but I no longer, in the last few years, I no longer have any Korean people see me and say to themselves, oh my gosh, it's a foreigner. Because that is something people would say out loud, 외국인이다.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that will make you feel stranger or more distanced from humanity than someone looking at you and saying, it's a foreigner. and it's a facet of the Korean language. Self-talk is really common. You go, oh, it's cold today.
Right.
Whereas I don't see a lot of native English speakers saying to themselves while walking down the street, oh, it's cold today, unless they're in a musical.
That's an interesting perception. You don't do that? I'm genuinely curious now. If you're walking down the street,
no.
like, I gotta eat something. you don't say that?
I think that is a linguistic difference. I think in
Okay.
English there's a lot less. You don't say, oh gosh, I'm annoyed out loud. Where Koreans would say, oh, 짜증나.
Even alone in a room.
Yeah. So I feel like that is a linguistic, like, what is it? Was it 혼잣말? I feel like talking to yourself or expressing something out loud is much more common in the Korean language. So it's not necessarily someone trying to make you feel bad by saying, oh, it's a foreigner, because they say, oh, I'm cold to themselves also. But it feels that way because as an English speaker, you're not used to it. So I think absolutely, I hear so much less of that now because I think more people are at least they have the knowledge, oh, this could come across this way. Yeah, I think cultural awareness is definitely up in the last 10 years. And that's beautiful because they don't have to change. There's no reason for them to change, but just out of kindness, realizing that someone else could take this
The wrong way.
Yeah, take this the wrong way, so they're not going to. That's so going out of your way. That's so next level kindness. So that definitely changed.
Does your husband do a lot of the self-talk? When he's speaking English or Korean, or is it different?
More in Korean, definitely more in Korean. I think I actually do self-talk in English, but it's planning. It's like, okay, I'm going to get my car keys, and then I'm going to grab my coat, and then we have 10 minutes to get there. Like, because I'm a planner, but not in the way Koreans do it in Korean. So yeah, husband does it more in Korean than English, definitely.
Do you think there's a difference in the genders and how much they do it?
Oh.
Because I've noticed that, at least I grew up with 3 sisters. I see it maybe, and I want to know your opinion. Just general my status, emoting, tired, hungry, cold.
Yes. Yes, emoting my status. Oh,
Yeah.
it's like live tweets.
Especially when partner is in vicinity.
Oh, I wonder if it's subconscious letting someone know.
Yeah.
Do we really know how much people are talking to themselves when they're absolutely alone? I don't know.
I guess we don't know. Yeah.
No, but I don't currently perceive a gender difference, but I'll be looking for it from here on out to see if there is one.
Cool.
I don't notice it. But I had one theory. One theory is that the Korean language has so many rules. It's very important to address someone a certain way based on how well I know them, their age, their power level,
Yes.
just different things. And it's so supremely important to maintain all of these rules in the spoken language, or it's very impolite. But if you're talking to yourself, there are no rules to break. So it might be a way to let off steam because you cannot be offensive when you're just talking to yourself, and you do need to talk. So maybe it's a way to get away from the burden
Yeah.
of maintaining proper speech.
Right, because you could be talking to someone and using, the polite honorific speech. 식사하셨어요?
네.
And then like you're like, 내가 뭐 먹었지? Like you
Yeah.
always suddenly you go to the casual speech while they're in front of you.
Right,
But you can use the 반말,
you
the
can
casual speech.
Take a break.
Yeah.
You can take a break from it. So that was one theory I had why it's a little more common in Korean. Don't know if that has any effect, but it's a possibility.
Very interesting. All right, well, it's very interesting to hear your observations, your experiences about how Korea has changed, and I think that's a good place to end it. Thank you so much for talking with me, Leigh.
Thank you, Sean. Glad to be here.
Right on. See you later.
Bye.
Hey, how's it going? What's your name? Where are you from?
Hi everyone, I'm Paul. I'm from Canada. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you, man?
Doing all right, thanks. Paul,
Yo.
what are your goals for this year?
I have some very modest goals.
I love it.
One is to just write a checklist of things I'm going to do every day. So I have a journal, I have a checklist of all these other things.
Your to-do list.
Exactly, yeah. Just write a checklist every day. And if I check everything off, I get to put a little cotton ball in a vase. And my goal is to look at that vase at the end of the year and see a couple hundred, maybe 365 little balls inside, and be really satisfied at like my little habit has created something massive. So in terms of like those little goals on the checklist, one of them is drink more water. So I'm gonna drink water before every meal. This one time I went hiking in Chirisan, and at that hostel, every night we would drink tea with the owner of the hostel. I felt revitalized every single morning. I don't think it was the tea that was magical. I think it was just me drinking a large amount of water every night. So every morning I could wake up and I felt strong and I felt healthy. So I think just drinking more water might solve so many small health problems like headaches, skin problems, all those minor things.
I love that goal. I have one question. Whenever I drink water, especially like in the evening and then I go to bed, I have to wake up and go to the bathroom. Does that not affect you? You can just stay asleep and not wake up and have to run to the bathroom.
When I wake up in the morning, I do go to the bathroom, but no, it hasn't been a problem yet. I try not to drink it all at night though. I try to drink it throughout the day.
Sure.
There's a good app I have that's just every time you drink a bottle of water, you press the button on the app and it says 600 milliliters, you just drank. And then every time you drink it again, press it again. Then at the end of the day, you can say, hey, I drank 3,000 milliliters today. That's my goal.
What else is on this checklist? So drink more water. What else?
Do you know what burpees are?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just do 100 burpees every day.
100.
100. So 100 in a row. You don't have to do them without stopping. But it takes about 10 minutes, maybe less if you're really fast, but me, about 10 minutes.
This sounds really hard.
It is hard, but it's only 10 minutes, right? like everyone's got 10 minutes in their day. And if you're waking up early enough, like I don't think anyone has an excuse. You can all find 10 minutes in your life. So just 100 burpees makes me feel like I've accomplished something. Every morning I wake up and do it and get that over with, and then I can just focus on the next thing.
Amazing, I love it. So it's very like health oriented, your checklist. Drinking water, doing burpees. Cool. Is there anything else, or is that kind of like a day to day, it changes day to day what you have to do?
The checklist changes day to day.
Sure.
I mean, that's just life, right?
Yeah. Sometimes you got to go to the bank.
Exactly. Sometimes it's like go to the passport office, get these pictures taken. I imagine once I get back to work tomorrow, it's going to be a lot of work-related stuff like finish this program, XYZ. But there's also more mentally focused ones.
Sure.
One of them is read for 15 minutes every night.
Love it.
Yeah, it's kind of health related because I think it puts me in a good mood for sleeping because I'm not looking at a screen. I'm looking at a book in my hands and I've put my phone away. I read my book for 15 minutes. The timer goes off. Turn that off. Close the book. Go to bed. And hopefully those ideas percolate in my mind overnight. And they can just give me new ideas to think about in life.
Yeah.
So I've got a big list of books that I'm hoping I can get through this year.
Do you like to read fiction or self-improvement or history? What genres do you like to read mostly?
I really like to read fiction. If you gave me a good fiction novel, I would sit down and consume it without stopping. I'm kind of a maniac. Like if you gave me a good book, I would just sit down and read it all weekend. And then I would stand up and be like, oh, I didn't eat breakfast or lunch today. What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
So I've tried to steer myself into nonfiction books where I can feel like I'm learning about the real world, but I can apply these ideas to my life. It's not just a very indirect thing like in fiction. Maybe you learn a lesson about how to be a better person,
Yeah.
but usually you're just enjoying the process. It's entertainment. So I feel like nonfiction, you get a bit more out of it. You learn things about the world, you learn things about yourself. I hope it'll make me a better person, hopefully smarter.
For me, some of my goals are like continue a fitness routine, 3 to 4 times a week, whether that's jujitsu or going to the gym or hiking or something like that. Because I work from home a lot, like it's easy for me to just sit down and sit at a desk and be inactive. So to me, like being active is like a huge goal of mine as well.
Yeah.
I like your burpee goal. It's cool. Another goal of mine is actually I'm getting married at the end of this year, so I want that to go well.
Nice.
Thank you. I don't have any honeymoon goals at the moment, but honeymoon would be nice. Other goals, yeah, I have a jiu-jitsu goal. Like I just want to continue to practice safely in a healthy way because you're doing martial arts. There's always a chance you can get injured, so I just want to be safe.
Does that mean like controlling your ego, that you don't go too hard or you don't try things that are a little too dangerous?
Like knowing my limits of my body. I have a bad shoulder. Some people are just too competitive, so I can't really spar with them.
Yeah. You gotta just smile and be like, I'm sorry, but not today, buddy.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
won't roll with you today.
Exactly.
You are a big, strong person with violent tendencies.
Oh yes. Other goals I have, I have business goals. I want to, grow my YouTube channel. I want to help more people with English. And I have another business I'm starting in the US. So business goals, I guess when you're getting married, you get really motivated to make more money.
Weddings aren't cheap, right?
Oh, no, they're not cheap at all. I agree with you. I like the goals that are just like do a little bit every day. Do a little bit every day. Like work on the business every day. Go to the gym, a few times a week. Eat healthily. Do something like go on a date once a week with your partner. Like these things are easy to not do because you get lazy or you get comfortable. But like, everything takes a little bit of work and upkeep, and you have to water every plant, and that's a relationship thing too. So just the healthy upkeep of everything, is very important.
Well, I think one of the goals is that some of these things just become so automatic that I'm reading 15 minutes day before 7 p.m. Then eventually I'll add on another goal. And eventually these goals can snowball into something bigger. Maybe it'll be study Korean for 1 hour every day. I have a much more modest goal of just study for 15 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Very doable.
How do you go about setting a goal for something that's not 100% in your control? Because I still think like there are some things in your life that we do need to achieve, we do need to do that aren't 100% in your control, right? For example, like I want to get a good job this year, but that's not 100% in your control. Or I want to win a competition, but that's not 100% in your control. So how do you go about setting goals in this scenario?
I would readjust the goal to focus on the process instead of the end goal. So the process of getting a better job could be, first I'm going to make a better resume. Then the second one will be, I'm going to send this resume to somebody I really respect, and that person's going to give me feedback on it. And then the third goal in the process might be apply to 5 jobs every week with unique cover letters.
Yeah.
So like, instead of focusing on the end goal, you're still focusing on the process, and you're being honest the whole time, saying, I am honestly making a very good resume. I am honestly applying to these jobs. So I think that's how I would do it.
So you would like create the goal that's like, I'm going to make a really good resume and apply to 5 jobs a week.
Yeah, I would say focus on the process instead of the goal.
Maybe like a terrible goal would be like, I'm going to win the lottery.
That's the stupidest goal imaginable. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of fun for a comedy, right? Like, but yeah, that's a pretty bad goal.
This year, my goal is to win the lottery.
Good luck, man. If you win.
Yeah.
I don't know. Buy me a car? Sure.
All right, I will. All right, I think that's a good place to end it, talking about goals. Everybody, what are your goals? Please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for talking with me, Paul. Yep.
Take care, man.
Cool. See you later. Hey, how's it going? What's your name? Where are you from?
Hi, my name is Chad and I'm from the US.
How long have you been in Korea, Chad?
I think altogether now it's been a little bit over 6 years, but the first time I was in Korea was nearly 10 years ago.
So you've seen Korea, I guess, change over the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot, both physically and sort of culturally a little bit too.
Absolutely. And you can even see like how much Korea is changing in terms of like the media it's producing, the music, the movies, the dramas, YouTube videos even. So that's my question for you. We can start anywhere, but how has Korea changed over the 10 years that you've witnessed it?
I guess if we start with sort of physical things that have changed in Korea, I find that there are so many things that we're still sort of lingering from before Korea fully developed.
Okay.
Now it's sort of those things have all but left. It's almost a rare sight to see some of those things anymore. So the first thing that comes to mind is sort of the squat toilets. They used to be so common. You know, if you go to like a restaurant or something, and you sort of have to go outside to go to the bathroom. Like the bathroom is just external to the restaurant. You'd go and it'd be like this sort of just little closet or whatever. That's the bathroom, but it's a squat toilet. And I remember that just being very sort of shocking to me the first time I was here in 2015, whereas now they're still here and there. You'll find maybe there's like one stall in like a subway bathroom that's the squat toilet.
Right.
But most of the time for like restaurants or wherever else, it's almost always like Western style, just, you know, a sit down toilet now instead. That's sort of one thing that's sort of evolved in, I mean, personally, a good way for me, right? I think I've only used a squat toilet maybe like once or twice in my entire life. Weird. Yes, just unfamiliar. I wouldn't say it's not bad. It's just, it's not something that I was ever familiar with.
I think that actually it might be healthy though.
I've heard that actually, like physically, it's actually very helpful for going to the bathroom. And so like, I get the science behind it, just culturally, it's just not something that I was ever used to, yeah.
All right, what else? Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on from the toilets, right? Culturally, I feel like there are many things that have changed in Korea. back when I first came here, I mean, I didn't really speak any Korean when I first came here, but when I came back to Korea the second time and started learning Korean and slowly got better at the language, I found that Koreans themselves were like shocked at being able to speak Korean. They didn't really like expect foreigners to be able to speak any Korean, let alone to the level that, you know, that me and you are able to speak now. And so it was very novel for them, you know, seeing foreigners that could speak Korean to any level above just basic expressions. And over the years, that has sort of like diminished. It's sort of gone the other way, right? More and more foreigners are able to speak Korean, mostly due to just Korea's rise in popularity worldwide, right? So lots of media has become super popular, whether it's K-pop or dramas, especially on Netflix, right? Certain dramas on Netflix have really surged in popularity, have caused more people to want to learn Korean. And so people speaking Korean to our level is not so shocking anymore. You know, I used to hear all the time that like, oh, wow, your Korean is so good. Like, how do you know this much Korean? But now it's like I maybe hear that once every few months. Since the beginning, it's never been a big deal for me. I'd be like, oh, no, I still have so much to learn. And, you know, I'd say things like this. And now for me, it's almost novel to hear them say that they're so impressed by my Korean, because I know that it's become sort of more common to see foreigners who speak Korean like us.
Yeah, I can absolutely relate to that.
Yeah.
Like I'm at the Home Plus and I'm asking, hey, I need to do this for this thing. Where's the ingredients for cooking this thing? And they're just like, oh yeah, you go to this aisle, you go here. Oh, what do you need? What exactly do you need? And it's just like, thank you very much, no worries, see you later. No mention of me speaking Korean to them. Or like I'm asking for example, I was looking for sour cream because I made chili and we wanted to put sour cream on top of the chili, and the lady's like, I can't find any, but just come with me and wait here. Like, if you didn't speak Korean, it would be hard for someone to follow those directions and like to know to wait, and not that she's just disappearing into a room. But she just completely treated me like I spoke Korean, and she just came out of this room with some sour cream and just gave it to me, and I was like, oh, thank you very much. And she was like, all right, see you later, bye. Amazing. And I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. Like I can just speak Korean and people don't really care.
Right, yeah.
And this is actually, I think, better. Like, this is what I want. I want, you know, Korean-speaking foreigners to be normal, because then it becomes more normal in society, and then society is like more accepting, and they're like, yes, we do have some people who live here long-term and they speak Korean, and okay, well, now we have to account for them too in society. I think that's a wonderful change.
Yes.
Although you get less opportunities to be the token Korean-speaking foreigner on TV or on the 방송 or on the YouTube channel. But I don't know, I would make that trade. Would you make that trade?
I would make that trade. I find that as Korean-speaking foreigners have sort of grown, we've sort of broken down some of that sort of fear of foreigners.
I have a funny story, real quick story. I remember this was a long time ago, like 7 years ago. I was with a friend of mine and we went to this like nightclub. It was pretty only Korean nightclub.
Yeah.
And this was so funny. They talked to me, they tested my Korean. And they're like, can you speak Korean? Okay, well, where are you from? Like, what are you doing in Korea? And I answered all the questions, I guess, successfully. And they're like, okay, he's good. Let me into the club with my Korean friend. It was amazing. But I was like, that kind of makes sense though, because if you can't speak, you know, the language and speak with the people in this club, you know, and we were all young and just kind of like socializing. But if you can't speak with the people, then why are you here? You know? I can't get mad at that. I think that's pretty interesting. Anyway, what else has changed in Korea? Bringing it back to the main topic.
The first time I came here was like 2015, right? And so almost 10 years ago now, and things were very different, not culturally, but like awareness of Korea was still relatively low. Right? And so if we compare that to now, Korea is like international superstar. They've got all these popular dramas, and K-pop is huge now worldwide. And back then, Korea was relatively unknown. You know, if I would go back to the US and visit with my friends, and I would tell, I'm living in Korea, I teach English in Korea, or whatever I was doing there, I'm studying in Korea, they'd be like, which Korea? Is it North or South Korea? You know? And
blink
now,
twice if you're safe, Chad.
Right, yeah. And so, you know, it was always a funny question to me as somebody who knows a lot about Korea, but even so, it's like, it's obviously not North Korea. Like,
Yeah.
It seems obvious, but I guess if you know nothing about Korea, then that's something that you could ask. But now it's like everybody knows Korea, right? If you're talking about Korea, you're probably unless you're talking about like nuclear weapons or something like that, you're probably talking about South Korea, right? K-pop and dramas and all this other cultural stuff. Food now is getting very popular as well. I'm talking about the foreigner perspective of, oh, they're much more aware of South Korea, but like South Korea is now also like self-aware that they are sort of catapulted into this starlight position, this spotlight on the world stage for these cultural things. And so they sort of have started to try and maintain that or increase their sort of market share on, worldwide culture by either exporting or really trying to emphasize these things. And so we see a lot more catering to international audiences, a lot more foreigners in Korea in general, right? Who are here as tourists that I wouldn't have seen nearly as many, 10 years ago. I would say that the sort of ratio of foreign presence in Korea has sort of gone up, and I would attribute that to Korea's relatively recent rise in, cultural popularity worldwide.
You can also see like a lot of English lyrics in songs.
Yes.
And I think that's like a big way that the music industry is trying to cater to international audiences. Like all these K-pop songs are like half English. But I mean, obviously that's by design so that, their fans around the world can understand them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I know that there are some artists who, they'll release their single or whatever, and it's the Korean version, right? It's in Korean naturally. But then, as like a bonus track or like later on they release like an all English version of the same song. So, and to do exactly what you just said, and I think it's to sort of cater, to sort of attract English-speaking audiences so that they can understand the lyrics and sort of participate and get interested in Korea. One other thing that has sort of stuck out to me as a man, but also just, as somebody who's aware of, cultural evolution in Korea, has been something with fashion, especially for women. And so Korea, I would still say, is a generally conservative society. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to fashion, I would always see girls wearing very, very covered up on the top, right?
Sure.
Very covered up on the top, but sometimes you would see, short skirts or whatever. And I found that over the past like 9-10 years, that's sort of shifted into a more liberal fashion sense. It used to be where if I would see somebody's shoulder, a girl's shoulder, it'd be like shocking. It would like turn my head because I'd be like, oh my God, a shoulder. Let alone something as liberal as like cleavage, like unheard of, right? But now I feel like that's sort of loosened a lot.
Yeah, common.
Yeah, it's very common to see, especially obviously if it's warm out, to see shoulders. Sometimes you even see cleavage now too. And for me to think about, when I first came here, it's like this would be unheard of. Like I would have never seen so much skin on the top half of the body of a girl, when I first came here, versus now where it's not really a big deal. You see shoulders, you see midriff sections, and of course even since the beginning when I first came here, lower half was always sort of whatever. You'd see girls in short shorts or skirts or whatever, and that was never really a big deal. It was always like the top half of the body was always very covered up, which I found strange at first, but now
because you're American.
Because I'm American,
and because where we're from, people wear whatever they want, and
Exactly.
It's not weird, it's not an issue, it's normal.
Right.
Even your family members who go to a family party and your aunt or your mom or whatever, just wearing whatever they want and no one cares.
Right, yeah, exactly. And now that's sort of like loosened. I've sort of seen it sort of become normalized for, to show a little bit more skin on top, which is neither good nor bad. It's just sort of an evolution that I've seen in Korea over the past, 9 years.
Yeah, it's a good example.
Yeah.
It's a good example. Cool. All right, well, we could keep talking about this, but I think it's a good place to end it. Thank you so much for chatting with me, Chad.
No, thank you for having me.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Did you enjoy this video? If so, please let me know in the comments down below. Once again, I'm Sean, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.